Hello everyone and welcome to the long-awaited Game 3 of the World Chess Championship match between Nepomniachtchi and Ding Liren. I say the long-awaited as we had a rest day. Every 2 days of play we have one rest day, so we have to wait a bit longer for the World Chess Championship match to continue. But now it resumes, and it was, in my opinion, quite action-packed, as you'll see once I present the game. But before that, here is who made the first ceremonial move. It is, as they called him on the FIDE's official Twitter page, the People's Hero of Kazakhstan, the astronaut Talgat Musabayev, making the first ceremonial move for the third game. The former cosmonaut Talgat Musabayev flew on 3 space flights, including 2 long-duration stays aboard the space station Mir. His third space flight was a short-duration visit mission to the International Space Station, which carried the first paying space tourists. He is now the head of Kazkosmos, Kazakhstan's national space agency. So there you have it, making the first move. You can't really tell much about the players. Nepo obviously being very happy, he's leading the match, and Ding, I think he can't wait to see what will happen on the board. Will it be the same as in game 1? If you remember, in game 1, Jan opened with e4, and we had that a very tricky line of the Rui Lopez. But here, already we have a switch in the first move. Jan plays pawn to d4, and now Ding has to really think on how to prepare for this. Of course, players are prepared for both d4 and e4, as those are the most standard moves you can make in chess, but still, probably one was expecting e4 here, as Jan had a very promising position in game 1. So okay, knight to f6 by Ding, we have pawn to c4, e6, and now knight to c3. Probably Jan was thinking that Ding would go for the Nimzo Indian with bishop to b4, but he doesn't. Ding just replies with d5, and we have the standard queen's gambit declined. And now, probably if Nepo went for some like knight to f3, we would see Daragozin defense, but Nepo goes for a trade in the center. C captures on d5, we have e captures on d5, and now bishop to g5, the so-called positional line, and now pawn to c6. We have e3 by Nepo, pawn to h6, bishop to h4, and bishop to e7. So all very nicely played. D3, bishop to d3, and kingside castles by Ding. And it's a very standard position. For example, Magnus Carlsen played this against white many times. He had this position against Firouzja. He had it against some other players as well. Or rather, he had it 3 times against Firouzja. He won one game, and he drew the other 2 games. And also, Magnus had this position with black against Parham Maksudlu, the game ended in a draw. So it is a fairly playable position. Queen to c2, and now we have rook to e8. There was a lot of discussion about this position, as there often is when the bishop is still on c8 and the queen is on c2. Imagine if black plays something like knight to e8. You might imagine bishop captures on e7, queen captures, and now knight captures on d5. And it seems like, okay, obviously this is not good for white, because after c captures on d5, there's queen captures on c8, but all of a sudden knight to c6. And what is happening here? It's a full rook sacrifice. And if queen captures rook here, then queen to b4 with check, and white will already have problems playing this game. For example, king to f1, now knight to f6, and the queen is trapped. Or rather, you have to pick up the second rook, queen captures, king captures, and now you continue playing this, but with the white king on f1, with the knight and rook still needing to find a way into the game, black will have a better game here. But it's not really a problem. All this can be averted, because after this queen captures on e7 and knight captures on d5, you don't have to go for this. You can just continue with knight to f3, and okay, nothing special is happening here. So that's why we don't see this funny knight to e8 line. We just have rook to e8 by Ding, just keeping the tension. Knight g to e2, the pretty standard maneuver. In the future, we want to play f3 and d4. That's one plan, and the other one is pulling off some sort of a minority attack with a4 and b4. So knight b to d7, we have castles, and now pawn to a5, stopping b4, as this is one of white's most common plans. We have a3, and now knight to h5. Ding now offers a trade of bishops. So we have bishop captures, king captures, and now you have to decide on how to continue this game. Most often, rook 8 to e1 is played. Now, the funny thing is, Ding Liren already had this position in the Chessable Masters 2022 against none other than Anish Giri, and Anish shared his thoughts on this position because he has analyzed it quite a lot. He said that the engine sometimes says that you should go rook to b1, and then whatever black plays, you should move the rook to e1, or play rook to c1, and then once black makes a move, put the rook to e1. Like, the engine makes some very weird suggestions in this position, so it's very hard to actually listen to the engine here. One of them is bishop to h7 check. Once the king moves, just bishop to back to d3, which is sort of giving black the move for having his king on h8 instead of on g8, so also very weird stuff. Plus, on the other hand, black can just repeat king to g8 if black wants to. But okay, here rook 8 to e1. Following the game Anish played against Ding in the Chessable Masters, we have knight to f8 now, and knight to c1. Sorry, knight to c1. The knight now wants to come to b3 and then to c5 to put pressure on black's queen side. And now we have knight to f6. You could consider some other moves, but Ding continues the way he played against Anish in the Chessable Masters. And now we have pawn to f3. Again, you could decide for something like knight to b3, let's say knight to e6 now, and now knight to d2. This is a way of shifting the knight back to f3 to control the d4 pawn, so you can execute e4 at some point, and also to just keep the d4 pawn defended. For example, now c5, you can play knight to f3, and the d4 pawn is nicely defended. Captures, captures, and the game continues. But instead, after this knight to f6 move, we have pawn to f3. Makes sense. You want to push e4, and you have plans of defending the d4 pawn, perhaps with queen to f2. So the queen defends the d4 pawn once e4 is played. But here we have knight to e6, and now the situation on the clock is an hour and 38 minutes for Nepo, and an hour and 10 minutes for Ding. So Nepo are definitely up on the clock, and now it's hard to really continue this game. Like I said, in the game Anish versus Ding, queen to f2 was played. That the game ended in a draw. But some of the moves you really want to make don't make sense. For example, king to h1 is the move you want to play, getting the king off of this diagonal. The problem is it runs into a tactic. Knight captures on d4, and you have problems here. For example, e captures, you're going to capture with the queen, rook captures with check, and this now ends in checkmate after bishop to f1 and rook captures on f1. So that doesn't work. Another thing that you might consider is bishop to f5. Okay, let's just put pressure on this knight that's attacking our d4 pawn, so we can capture it maybe and push e4. The problem is here knight captures on d4 also works, and now it's just a pure sort of a queen sacrifice. Not really a queen sacrifice, giving up the queen for lots of material. Queen captures on e1, rook captures, and rook captures with check. And now after king to f2, it seems that black really has nothing here. There's bishop captures on f5, and after queen captures on f5, now you're just going to play rook captures on c1, and black has a fair amount of compensation for the queen, two rooks, and the pawn. Should be very nice for black. So instead, after this knight to e6 move, we don't have any of these moves that we've discussed, the bishop to f5 or h3. Here, instead, we have knight 1 to e2, and it is now as of move 17 that we have a completely new game. And it took Nepo quite some time to figure this one out, because I think Nepo was also remembering this game that Ding played against Anish, and he thought that maybe this was his actual plan, what he wanted to play against this, but then he figured that it doesn't really give you all that much. So because, for example, if queen to f2, you might imagine something like pawn to b5, and now it's very hard to play. If you now execute e4, let's say d captures, knight captures, all of a sudden rook to d8. Now the d4 pawn is under attack, and if knight to e2, you can play pawn to b4, and it's giving black maybe more than you should. Bishop to e6 coming next, and so on. So that's why Jan played knight 1 to e2, and now we have pawn to c5 by Ding. Just going after white's strong center here. C5 is not mandatory by any means. You could play rook to b8 to prepare b5. You could play b5 right away, which also makes sense with an idea of maybe b4 later on. But okay, c5 is the move. We have bishop to b5 now. Again, many moves you could consider here, like you could consider queen to d2, as it simply makes sense from a positional standpoint, because you know that bishop to d7 and rook to c8 are coming, so the queen will be under attack. Also, a fine line to consider is knight to f4. Now, if bishop to d7, you can trade here. Let's say bishop captures, pawn captures, and you will have this fine grip on the position with bishop to g6. Now, the other rook has to come to c8, and now you're going to move the queen. Pretty much the queen comes to d2 in all the lines, so you can play it pretty much whenever. Let's say b5, and now if d captures on c5, queen captures on c5, knight to e2, and okay, now the rook's maybe coming to the c file. It's a fine position for both white and black. Maybe the black position looks a bit weakened with only the G and H pawn guarding the black king, but it's very much playable. However, Nepo went for bishop to b5, and this move is a very tricky because Ding really wants to play bishop to d7. So it kind of looks like you're allowing him to play bishop to d7 with tempo now. The problem is, if you go bishop to d7 here, then look at this. Bishop captures, queen captures, and now how do you continue this? If d captures on c5, then there are a lot of tricky moves here. Let's say knight captures on c5, now knight to d4, and now rook 8 to c8, putting pressure on the queen here, just queen to d2, and it's a very odd position. Pretty much it's always the same thing. Black has the d pawn, white has the backwards e3 pawn, and perhaps the weak b2 pawn, and should be okay if you play perfect moves, but only if you play perfect moves. Also, there's the thing of after bishop d7, that after bishop captures and queen captures, you can go for this very tricky knight to a4 move. And now it seems like you're going after b6, which is just winning material. And also, if you stop this, how are you stopping just capturing a pawn here? Well, you stop it by playing c captures on d4, and this is what black has, and why this plan for white isn't so spectacular. Let's say knight to b6 attacks the queen and rook here, queen to d6, you can capture the rook, but now d captures on e3, you grab another pawn, and of course the knight will be captured. There's no way of stopping that. c7 square is covered by the queen and by the knight, so you're going to have to play queen to b3 to prepare the rescue of the knight, but also you're just going after the e3 pawn. And now if rook captures on a8, queen will capture on e3, and now let's say pawn to d4 looks very strong for both white and black, to be honest, but now rook to d1, and it's very hard to say if this d4 move does anything. Let's say knight to d5 attacks the queen, queen f2, now knight d to f4, we trade everything, captures, and now you have this position where if you capture on d4, then there's this very nasty knight to e2 check. So it seems the black keeps the pawn, and it's a very offbeat position where white is up the exchange, but black has the passed pawn and the knight here. So maybe it's a bit too much of an active play to give to Ding, but Ding decides against it, and Ding just keeps the pressure on the board. After bishop to b5, he doesn't go for bishop to d7, he just plays rook to d8, and he says, all right, let's play this. I'm not in a rush to trade anything. Let's continue the game. D captures on c5 by Jan, queen captures on c5, and now queen to d2. Like I said, the move that should be played in all the lines. And now the question is, what does Ding want to play here? He can just claim a draw right away. If he plays d4, then we pretty much trade everything. Let's say captures, and here let's say rook to d1, captures, and after this fabulous capture fest is over, equal material, not much to look forward to here. It's let's say bishop to e6, it's still a draw. However, Ding goes bishop to d7, he refrains from playing d4, and he offers a trade of bishops now, and Nepo accepts this, and this is very tricky. What he probably should have gone for is knight to d4. This sort of keeps the tension in the game. Let's say knight to e8, and now after rook to c1, putting pressure on the queen, just knight captures on d4. He captures queen d6 and bishop back to d3. Keeps the tension, and the position is fine for both white and black. However, after this bishop captures on d7 move, he thought that Ding has to recapture with the rook here, but Ding just played knight captures on d7. And now what's up with the d5 pawn? Can you capture this? No, you can't, because if you capture with the queen, then queen captures on e3 check, and you are in problems here. You do not want to give up this e3 pawn. If anything, you want to keep it forever. At some point, you want to play it to e4. If you capture with the knight, then knight to b6 wins material here. There's no way to save the knight, and of course, this is impossible because, the queen would deliver check to the white king. So instead, after knight captures on d7, Nepo played knight to d4, and now we have knight to b6 now. Now it seems that Ding's knight is coming to c4, and it will put pressure on b2, the queen, and the e3 pawn. And this is I believe, first time in 3 games that Nepo became a little bit worried about the outcome of this game, because this is there's definitely a lot to hold here. And the situation on the clock is 1 hour for Nepo, 47 minutes for Ding. He played rook to d1. And okay, any move will be met with knight to c4, so it's merely a matter of keeping around the d4 knight. Knight to c4 attacks the queen, and now queen to f2. And here is the move that really I think where Ding really wanted to play knight captures on a3, because it sort of wins a clean pawn if you capture, then just queen captures on c3. But there's a problem. What if pawn to e4 is played? And now, how do you stop pawn captures on d5? Is there any way to stop this? If you play pawn captures here, then just knight captures on e4, and now the queen is attacked, the knight is no longer on c3, and now b captures on a3 will just win a clean piece. So you can't allow this knight to move from c3 with tempo. So you don't have that. Aside from that, after e4, you could play knight captures on d4, but it's not much better. Rook captures on d4, and now knight to b5. The knight now has to move. You can't allow the white knight to move from c3. And now if knight captures, queen captures, just rook f to d1, and this is how white retains material equality. There's no way to actually save the d5 pawn. So after queen to f2, while knight captures on a3 is a move you want to play, Ding plays rook 8 to c8, which, if you give the engine enough time, it is the first line of the engine, so Ding calculates properly. And now, okay, Nepo very happy, knight to a4 attacks the black queen. We have queen back to e7, and now rook f to e1. As this is a problematic pawn, you want to have it sufficiently defended. And now queen to f6 by Ding. And Ding pretty much played all of his moves instantly here. Another move to consider is knight captures on d4. I will just show it because it's a lot of fun. Now, e captures is possible, rook captures is a little bit better, because d5 also is a little bit weak. For example, b5 attacks the knight to c3, and now queen to c5 with b4 planned. Maybe not a terrible option for Ding, but instead Ding went for queen to f6, and now comes knight to b5 by Nepo. And now the situation on the clock is 41 minutes Nepo, 31 minutes for Ding, and here Ding went into a deep think and played knight to c7, which is definitely the way to go. It is the top move recommended by the engine. And Nepo might even be, prompted into trading, because he could be a little bit worried here. The problem is, if he trades, let's say knight captures on c7 and rook captures, there are all sorts of lines to consider here, most of them favoring black. Like one of them, okay, you could just play rook to d3 in hopes of maybe doubling up on the d file. But look at this. If you go knight to c3, let's say you try a little tactics, and now let's say knight captures on b2, knight captures on d5, and now queen to e5. Let's say something like this happens. The problem is here you have queen to g3, and white just wins. There's no way to avoid this, because now after rook captures on d5, which is your top move, rook captures, there's just queen captures on d5 and queen captures on c7. So white will be up the exchange, and even if you don't trade, even if you just trade on g3, white will still be up the exchange. Two rooks against the rook and the knight. The problem is, after knight captures on d5, you don't have to go queen e5, you can go queen to g5, and now it's pretty much, we just trade everything off. Queen captures on b2, rook captures on d5, and after rook captures on d5, queen captures on d5, and now let's say queen to d4 offers a queen trade, but just queen to c6. And the problem is now, yes, you've freed your e3 pawn, it's no longer a backwards pawn, but you will be able to play it to e4, but you've allowed black the 2-to-1 advantage on the queen side. Ding will put a rook on the b file, play b5, b4, create a pass pawn, and basically Nepo will have to defend for the rest of the game. So that's the problem with actually trading on c7. So here Nepo considered the position for some time. He played knight back to d4, and now everyone expected Ding to go for b5. It's the move that he prepared. It's the move that he dreamt of for the entire game. Everyone thought b5 would be played here, and after knight to c3, now just rook to e8, just keeping the tension, putting pressure on that backwards e3 pawn. And this knight captures, while it is an option, it doesn't yield all that much. For example, captures, captures, and captures. Now queen to b6 puts pressure on the knight, puts pressure on e3. Also, if the knight moves, puts pressure on b2. And now if knight to d4, you can just trade here. Captures, captures, and captures. And if rook to d2, you always have this very nasty pressure with the beautiful knight on c4, putting pressure on the a pawn, putting pressure on the backwards e3 pawn. So it just seems like it's much harder to play this for white. The engine, of course, assesses this as 0.00, but it just feels like it should be easier to play with black. However, to everyone's surprise, Ding did not go for b5. Ding actually repeated knight to e6. And here Nepo said, all right, are we actually doing this? He played knight to b5, Ding played knight to c7, Nepo played knight to d4, Ding played knight to e6, and it was in this position that the players agreed to a draw, or rather it's a draw by threefold repetition on move 30. As you know, it's impossible to offer a draw before move 40. Those are the official rules of the World Chess Championship match, but if it's a draw by threefold repetition, then it's just a draw. So very, very nice game. I don't feel like Nepo got all that much with d4 as he got with e4, and it seemed like both of them were really mixing up their preparation. Like both of them were following the game Ding already played against Anish, and then at some point, they just had to really start calculating, and this was the end result. So Ding did get something little out of the opening, and he could have maybe gotten a bit more, but he already lost the game. He doesn't want to overpush it and be down 2 points in a World Chess Championship match. But yeah, it's gonna be very interesting to see what Nepo and his team come up with for Game 5 with the white pieces. It's probably gonna be another e4. But you never know. Nepo could have something planned like let's play e4, d4, knight to f3, and then c4, making it impossible for Ding to prepare for any game with the white pieces. And then I also think it's going to be pretty impossible once they repeat, like they go into game 9, which opening will they choose. So that could be the plan. It could be just switching between e4 and d4. It could be just seeing what does better and then sticking with that. So there's no idea. There's no way for us to know. We'll just have to see what happens. But yeah, a very exciting game. Could have a lot could have happened. Maybe the position still could have been played. But the problem is the players repeated moves here, and the repetition of moves is in fact the strongest move by both players in the given position recommended by the engine. So I mean, objectively, they played it like a computer. So yeah, that's the game. Hope you guys enjoyed it. The World Chess Championship Game 3 between Nepomniachtchi and Ding Liren. We'll see what happens in Game 4, and will Ding prepare something special for us with the white pieces, because what he brought for Game 2, although quite an impressive surprise with that h3 move, it's very hard for me to imagine that he will repeat that, but maybe he will. So we'll see what happens tomorrow. So yeah, that's the game. Hope you guys enjoyed it. I would like to thank Yaroslav Siembida, Seth Borgo, Matthew Benoit, JB, and James Cashman for your contribution to my channel. Thank you a lot. I really appreciate it. As usual, you can check 2 of my previous videos here. Thank you all for watching, and I will see you soon, continuing the coverage of the World Chess Championship match until it finishes. So thank you all. I will see you soon, and have an excellent rest of your day.